Hello everyone, can everyone hear me? Cool. Je vais faire la présentation en anglais. Fait que si je parle trop vite en anglais, je dis quelque chose pas clair, là, lève ta main, je peux répéter en français ou aller plus lentement. Fait que, OK. So today I'm going to talk about how to achieve performant designs easier. So first of all, my name is Mike. I'm from this Quebec studio. Quick question, is there any programmers in the room? Oh, yes. Okay, so I'm an audio programmer, so I'm on the other scale of the technical part of audio. I've worked at the Ubisoft Quebec for about 11 years now. I've worked on a bunch of different projects, all the way from little projects like Child of Lights to big projects like AC3, Odyssey, Syndicate, and the Division 1, Division 2. So I've got quite a wide variety of experience with different teams. And so this is kind of what has led me to be able to develop a method with the guys at Quebec to get the sounds in the game and everyone to be happier at the end of the day. So I've got just 4 parts of this presentation. Really, how do we do this? Basically, structuring your data, systemic design, but I mean, design in general, this can apply to it. I'll talk more specifically about systemic design because that's really what we focus a lot on in Quebec. And then I can talk about some of the results we had between 2 AC projects. So, just to give an idea of exactly, what this meant for us in Quebec. So what does this entail? There's 3 really important parts. First of all, you need to have a team that is ready and willing to adapt their methods of working. So first, I mean, what I saw when I was working on the Division 2 was like, there was this awesome design in Wise, and everything sounded really great. And then afterwards, it was like, oh, then we'll talk to the programmers when there's a problem. No, can't do that. That is a world of hurt waiting to happen. The second part is in terms of the timeline. You can't start thinking about performance at the end of a project. If you don't start thinking about it at the beginning of the project, you're going to have somebody like me that's going to be like really like circles in the eyes, really upset, really, because you have to cut your design, or that, RFX system doesn't work properly, or you've added too many layers, those RTBCs, and stuff like that. So thinking at it from the beginning and the pre-production, even the conception phase, is super important to get these designs in the game and have them working the exact way that you want. I kind of hope it's a little evident, but I mean, I'll say it anyways. Always have to measure and adapt, because today, yes, it works fine, everything's great, but tomorrow some designer somewhere in the building has decided, oh, hey, I want to add this new effect, or I want to take this gameplay ingredient that you've used in the underground of your game, and now I want it to be everywhere. You need to be able to measure that and continually adapt to the changing realities of game development, because they might write down the design 2 years ago, but is that the design that ends up in the game? Most likely not. So you have to constantly be paying attention to what's going on and talking with other teams. And I mean, most people here, I would assume, know audio is always an afterthought. So we have to be really vigilant about making sure people don't forget about audio and it's not just an afterthought. So now I want to talk a little bit about structuring your data. Now, this is going to specifically be for Wise. My knowledge of Fmod is limited, and the other solutions I'm not really sure. Even there's a Cryware, and there's built-in for Unreal, and all the different proprietary solutions. But this kind of works for everything, but Wise is just the example. So structuring your data is super important. Your crazy, out of the world, amazing design is great and is going to sound amazing, but it's nothing if it's not performant, right? So this is actually a design that somebody did inside Wise. Yeah, my first reaction was, why? So someone sent this to me, and thankfully I wasn't working directly with this person because I might have, harmed them. So the question really was, but why are you doing this? Now, I understand that as audio people, we want to have we have ears that other people don't have. you give this to somebody in this room, and yeah, they're going to hear the difference. But if you add this curve into 60 other sounds that are playing at the same time, are you going to hear the level of detail? Maybe if you have the really great sound system, or you have the headphones at your desk, maybe you'll hear it. But ultimately, I really don't think for games specifically that this kind of design is necessary, because you can achieve the overall curve in a different way. Discuss with the programmer, because there's always a solution in code. Now, the question a lot of people are like, can we do this? Almost always, the answer should almost always be yes. But how much time does it take? A simple curve like this, we can do this in code. You tell us what kind of curve it is, what you're kind of looking at. We can take the mathematical expression and give it to you in an RTPC, and we can do this in a much more performant way. So, but on the other side, this could be okay at the same time. So if you ask a programmer for their perspective, or not even necessarily a programmer, someone who's got the performance in mind, if you ask them, hey, what do you think about this curve? First, there's got to be a few questions first. How often is it used? Oh, well, I use it for one element, during a boss fight. Okay, well, who cares then? It's not that big a deal. Let's take a look. Let's see what it costs. I mean, will you be able to hear the nuances of the design? Okay, well, if it's silent, there's no ambiances, there's no artifacts, there's no explosions. Yeah, you could probably hear the nuances. I mean, the average player. I'm not talking audiophiles. I'm talking people who actually are going to play it on their couch with the horrible TV speakers. Maybe they'll be able to hear the nuances. Then I have already alluded to this. Is there a way that we can do this outside of Wise or outside the audio middleware to give you the exact same result that you're looking for, but just in a more performant way? So this is not exactly from a game, but this is kind of representative of a system that you'll see for Foley inside Assassin's Creed. Our navigation system is super complex, it's super deep, and for those of you who don't work with Wise, all the little symbols here are this is a switch container, random container, and then sounds. So what does this mean? It means in terms of performance that every time you play a sound, Wise has to go and resolve and figure out the tree of how to play the sound. For something that's played, again, once in a while, it's not a big deal. But when you have a main character navigation system that's based on this, it's going to be expensive. Do we want to do that? That's a question of what kind of emphasis we really want to put on that kind of design element. So if it's something that, for an NPC, my personal first thought is no, forget it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially if it's someone you might see once in the game. That level of detail to me just doesn't make a lot of sense, but there might be a reason for it. This is a fully data-driven type of solution. So you can go crazy. Here's Wise, go do your design. We've actually started moving more towards reducing this kind of complexity to remove the kind of cost inside Wise. So we can do the exact same kind of design in a different way. So, it's entirely possible. So for a game like Assassin's Creed, not really great. It still could be workable, but a game that has 5 characters on the screen at any given time, this might be fine. The little game that you do in Unity or Unreal, there's a team of 20 people. Hey, it could be great. It could be awesome. But we need to think about this before we go and delve really deep into pitching this in the game and then just hoping everything's great, because ultimately, someone's going to be upset. So the next part about systemic design. Like I said before, systemic design is something we focus on with Assassin's Creed because we build these massive worlds and we can't go and play the entire game. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey was an order of magnitude bigger than Assassin's Creed Syndicate. The world was 16 kilometers by 16 kilometers. And, we try to mix stuff in a way that works for most stuff, but most situations, but we can't do in every situation because it's just not possible. The game has 100 hours plus of gameplay. So the first thing when you come to systemic design, this applies basically to any programming sport. You need to sit down to define what are your requirements. When you go to a programmer and say, I have this great idea, awesome. Programmers don't want to say no. They want to help you get what you want in the game. When people ask what an audio programmer is, my first response is we help to realize the artistic vision of the designers. So from that kind of view, it's okay, how do I help you get this in the game? So if you have this kind of fuzzy idea, it's going to end up as a fuzzy result. But if you have a defined requirements of what you want, so the first question I'll ask when anybody says to me, it's like, oh, I want to do A. Okay, why do you want to do A? Not because I'm trying to be difficult, but it's why do you want to do this? Okay, well, I'm trying to achieve this result of like, doing the sound in a way that, it's unique to this kind of tree, but, this other tree here doesn't have this kind of unique. Okay, well, that's what you're trying to do. Well, maybe we can tweak your design in a different way so that we can, have a different result, but still give you exactly what you're kind of looking for. Maybe it won't be exactly what you were thinking, but it still, kind of helps mold and shape your idea to something that's more usable in a game in a performant kind of sense. Now, MVP, so I'm going to use the acronym in, but MVP, if you ever see this, it's not most valuable player, it's minimal viable product. So when we talk about minimal viable product, it's what is the least that I can do before I can show something to you. So if you say, I want to have an RFX system. Okay, cool. I want to have an RFX system where I can place it on every tree, every rock, every bush. I can move with the river. Awesome. Okay, that's cool. But what's the very least amount of functionality that you need to evaluate and validate your idea? Okay, well, I want to be able to have it on a bunch of trees and be able to run around, and then I can listen to how it sounds. So one of the things we did in Assassin's Creed Odyssey was we did this new RFX system, which our audio director will constantly refer to as removing the cone of silence. Because in previous iterations of Assassin's Creed, it was very distant and there was nothing close because we had no way of ultimately placing a sound on a specific object in the world, moving or not. So we couldn't put it on a tree, we couldn't put it on a rock, so you'd have dogs you'd have dogs in Assassin's Creed Syndicate that would be barking in the distance. Now sometimes they'd bark in the distance and there'd be nothing in the street. I mean, you can kind of get away with that because, suspension of disbelief allows people, oh, okay, maybe I just can't see it. Maybe it's not exactly coming from down this empty street where there's nothing there, but it's kind of okay. So when we moved and created the RFX system on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, what we did was we said, we want to have position sound, ultimately, right? So the first minimal viable product was, I want to be able to place a sound that can play randomly controlled in code on a specific tree or a specific rock. Once we got that, I was like, okay, well, yeah, this makes sense. Let's move forward with this because now we know that this is exactly what we want. Now we can add all the little other details that we want later. So, during time of night, it doesn't play as often. If it's at 12 o'clock or, in the middle of the day, it plays a different type of sound. But, being able to have like a gym, a showroom where you can go and just walk around and, oh yeah, I guess these birds in the tree are placed correctly. Super important because minimal viable products will ultimately allow you to evaluate and validate ideas that you thought, oh yeah, this would be really cool, but you get playing with the system, oh, okay, well, I mean, I guess it doesn't really make sense. It also allows a programmer to sit down and say, hey, this doesn't really work in terms of performance like I thought it was going to. Do we need it? And if you say yes, it's not the first response generally isn't, okay, well, you can't have it. Well, all right, let's figure out a way to make it happen. So this allows to 5-minute discussions of, okay, this feature, this part, this sub request, okay, cool, it's useful, it's not useful. It allows us to make really quick snap judgments about what is and isn't useful. So now we can talk about, yeah, this would be a great idea, but what does this ultimately lead to? So this method in practice between Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So Assassin's Creed Syndicate was done with Ubisoft Quebec was the lead studio. A lot of the same senior people are still there, and I worked on Odyssey. But the difference between the two was on Assassin's Creed Syndicate, at the end of the game, when we're in shipping period, polish, debugging, we had 15 major performance issues. One of those issues was whenever we tried to spawn an NPC, it would take 6 milliseconds. So a frame is 33 milliseconds. So, and our budget's half of that, right? So 6 milliseconds out of 15 milliseconds, that's 1/3 of our entire budget for one frame just to spawn an NPC, right? So it was this kind of performance issues at the end that were, oh, my clock's disappeared now. Oh, well. at the end that were really problematic, because what it comes down to is now a programmer has to go and say, okay, well, listen, you put 4 convolution reverbs on this environment in the game, and all right, well, I mean, you've mixed it, you've tweaked it, all your assets are working really well with it, but ultimately we can't ship the game because, you know, we're at 20 frames per second when we need to be at 30 on console. So with implementing these kind of strategies at the beginning of Odyssey, so what it means for us is, first of all, you define your requirements, and you have kind of his title on Syndicate was like a assistant or some assistant something or other, but basically he was the technical sound designer. That's what his role was. So he would sit down and he would talk with you, and you kind of write out what you want, and then it would come to me and it'd be like, okay, do it. Okay, all right, well, we'll go through, try to get it done. But now on Odyssey, what we did was, okay, you had the first conversation. Okay, I want to do this, I think. He would, there would be evaluation. Is there something that already exists? Do we need to create a new system? Do we need programming support? Can we do this in data? Can we do this in data versus, doing a new system that will be more efficient for us, but it would let something else slip in the backlog. So, that fix for click that button that's blue, now it'll, instead of it being, not blue, it'll stay blue for the rest of production. So he kind of took this kind of information and just kind of thought about it. And then, all right, let's go ahead. So they would go ahead, and then the next step would be, let's have a conversation with the programmer. Okay, now the programmer says, programmer being me, was like, okay, well, this makes sense. All right, let's do it. Okay, write me down give me a JIRA, give me the full written explanation of everything you want. And the reason I always ask for a written explanation is very simple. When you try to explain it verbally, you kind of, okay, yeah, and you can have a shorthand back and forth. But ultimately, when you think about it and you write it down, it forces people to think exactly and clearly about what they want. So, and this kind of leads to the next point. Think about performance constantly. So you're writing down your requirements and you're thinking, all right, I need to have 16 sounds. Oh, okay, well, maybe I don't need to have 16 sounds. Maybe it's only like 8 sounds to get the same kind of behavior. So the writing down, the talking, all these little steps, we do these not to make the process longer, which it will, but we do this to make it so that people stop and reflect. So that we don't build a system, or we don't do programming support, give programming support for something that ultimately we're not going to use. So the TLDR is, think about performance constantly. When designing, get a second opinion. How many people have a dedicated audio programmer or a programmer that they can talk to? Like maybe a tenth of the room? Okay. So this doesn't have to be a programmer, but it needs to be somebody with a technical mindset. So if you're working with, if you have a technical sound designer, great. If that's your point of contact, and even if they're not able to say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense in terms of it's going to take 10% of our budget, it's going to take 15% of our budget, it's going to take 30% of our budget. If they can stop and say, okay, well, you're going to do a switch and a random and a blend and whatever kind of container and data, it allows them to sit and, give you the questions. Can we do this in a different way, in a more streamlined way? The third point is an iterative design with constant reviews is ultimately going to make things a lot easier for you, because things that you think you need at the beginning of a production aren't the same a month in, 6 months in, 12 months in. And I wrote the last point is get your data reviewed by a programmer so you don't do these crazy curves. But I mean, get your data reviewed. I mean, this is not just for performance. I think everyone should have all their data reviewed, because talking about it helps you rationalize and helps other people as well. So other people understand your decisions. So you can have your mentoring as well. So it's a twofold thing. So you can teach people about what you've done, and you can rationalize it with them as well. So it really is. It's really helpful, I think, for a number of reasons. And that's it for me. Yes. Under 20 minutes. All right. Any questions? If something wasn't clear, please don't hesitate to ask, because if it wasn't clear for you, it wasn't clear for someone else. I guarantee it.
So my question is on a technical point. If you have to make a sound, like example for Assassin's Creed, some people will talk in the background, so the volume is lower. Do you have to do the recording 2 times to make it more real, or you just lower the feed, lower the volume of the soundtrack, or do you record it as a...
Well, so I mean, the ultimate ideal for us in Assassin's Creed when we're doing something like that was like we wanted to have like a projection system where you like, you know, you have whisper where people are whispering, and you have normal speaking, and then project it when people are really talking really loud. Because if you take a fader on a sound, normal speaking, and move it up, it doesn't sound great. However, but this also goes back to like how to get more performance design as well, because this is a pure data thing. And if you sit and talk with somebody and say, okay, we have these NPCs in Assassin's Creed and they're in the background and they're talking, do we record them with different levels of projection? Do we record them twice? I mean, maybe you want to, maybe that's it depends on the context of your game. For me, I would say, I mean, there's no need because they're background characters, not super important. If you're talking about some random person in the crowd in the background that you don't know their name, no. But if you're talking about somebody who is, you know, like a quest giver or something like that, something that's more important, has importance. If you judge that to be a design that's important and you want to push that quality, then I'd say yes, depending on the situation. So there is no there's no black or white answer. So it really depends on on the context. And if you want to talk to more people about voice, these guys sitting in the front, they're the ones that make all the voice stuff happen. They can tell you more about that kind of stuff. So in the mingling time, I'll talk to them. Anybody else? Oh.
When do you set the memory budget for for all the systems? Is it doing like at the beginning and then rising as needed, or not?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question because we do postmortems in all our games, and one of the things was I have no idea what our budget is. So from Odyssey, that's one of the things come out. So we have a budget overall on our games. In terms of performance and CPU and memory, not really on disk, but the thing is, it's setting something in stone. It's not great because it doesn't allow us to be flexible. So what our I don't know how to call him, our assistant audio director, the technical guy, the guy who's responsible for saying that kind of stuff, he doesn't want to set a solid budget like that because, if you come and say, I have a 50 megs in memory, you give me 50 megs, but I have 55. Okay, well, maybe we can, the reason he does that is because maybe you can figure out how to remove 5 megs elsewhere to give you the 5 megs if they judge it necessary. So we kind of, one of the things I would love to do is say, ambience get 15%, voice gets 10%, but we can't. We can just kind of say, so if like reverbs get we let reverbs have like 15% of CPU time, and we have voice that gets, 10, 15%, or it might get 25% if we're in a dialogue, or it might get 50%. So I would love to give you a yes or no, black or white, but again, it's not possible, I think, and to be in a very flexible design way. But if I had to, it would be like we set that kind of at the beginning of the game as kind of like what we want, and we kind of solidify the more that we design, the more that designs are revealed to us, that kind of stuff.
Does the same thing apply for CPU, like bandwidth, streaming, and I/O access?
So for I/O stuff, we basically have a golden rule where anything that's more than X number of seconds long gets basically streamed automatically, and we use ambiances, music, walla pads are a good example, but everything else basically isn't streamed, and that's just the reality for our game. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be the same for the Division, something completely different. Like it's just depending on the overall. So, but we have golden rules about what gets streamed and what doesn't. So RFX, no. Voice, certain types of voice always get streamed. Other types don't. But that comes with the context. So like I don't know how many people are familiar with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. We have a new kind of dialogue system, and all the dialogues, all the voices in the dialogues aren't streamed. But all the AI kind of stuff is, because AI stuff can happen basically anytime, and it's not really important that it's time synced with any kind of lip movement. So, no problem. Okay, if you guys have any questions afterwards, you can find me on the Facebook page and like just write me a message.
Will
So
you be at the pub?
probably not,
Probably not. So
but I mean, always willing to have a discussion, virtual or not. So hit me up. Cool. Thanks everyone.